Okay, my friends, we will continue with the lesson. We left off talking about the red horse, and just have one more main thing to cover there. The first, we're talking about the four horsemen of the apocalypse as are famously known. And it's all kinds of interpretation about what these represent, but it represents uh, the progression of the person as he's progressing toward becoming like Christ. And the four horsemen represent the four aspects of the lower nature. And the pale horse was first. He represents the physical nature, and the disciple must conquer the physical nature, and the physical world, so he has mastery over the physical world rather than the physical world having mastery over him. He learns to be able to be self-sufficient, take care of himself, take care of his body so he has good health, so his body can function as an instrument that's useful rather than something that drags him down. And so this is the pale horse. And then the second horse, which is red, represents the life force. And a lot of people think the red represents the anger or emotion, but it represents the life force. In the Bible, it says the life of the body is the blood, and the blood, of course, is red. And the symbol of the beast connected with the second horse is the calf. And of course, they sacrificed the calf and spilled his blood in the days of Moses. Now, it's interesting. It says that, and power was given him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. Now, what causes people to kill one another more than anything else? What causes people? What was that?
The different belief systems.
Okay, different belief systems. And what is there about the different belief systems that causes a threat? Let's say a burglar breaks into your house and he's got a gun, and you realize that the only way to survive is to shoot him, okay, first, before he shoots you. So you shoot him. So you have a situation where it's kill or be killed, okay? That's the way you're looking at it. And this is what causes people to kill one another when they're in that situation where they feel they have to kill or be killed. And this is what happens when the life is threatened. When your life is threatened, then the average person, he just goes into that mode. I have to kill or be killed, okay? Now, this life that is threatened, this life energy that is threatened, it's threatened in a lot more ways than a burglar or some bad guy producing a threat. When Christ introduced his teachings to the world, how did the authorities view that? Did they view it as a threat? Not so much to their physical life, but to the life of their belief system. The life of their belief system was threatened by what Jesus taught, even though it was brotherly love and peace on earth and a lot of good things was in his message. Didn't matter. It was a threat to the life of their thought form. And so what did they do to Jesus? They killed him, or tried to kill him. Now, after he left the scene, it continued that way. The divisions of belief systems fractured. There was all kinds of Christian belief systems. Then there was Muslim versus Christian, and they viewed each other with the idea that the life of their system was threatened. And all because the Christ introduced higher teachings, and the higher teachings threatened the belief systems of many, and it caused people to kill one another and to carry a great sword, so to speak. And during these last 2,000 years, all kinds of wars and blood has been spilled because of different beliefs centered around the Christ. Even though his original message was pure and beautiful and peaceful, the effect was a big disruption. Now, this happens when to some degree, maybe not as pronounced as it happened with Jesus, but it happens when you as a disciple reaches this point in your evolution where you begin to introduce teachings and thoughts and situations that threatened the life of belief systems of especially the powers that be, or even minor powers. They will then look on you as an enemy, and say you're successful, like Abraham Lincoln was, as we gave last week, because of what he believed. He was a threat to the system of slavery, for instance. And this happens with everybody. Like, even right now, Elon Musk is a really good example. He was going along with all the powers that be, didn't cause any disruption, and now all of a sudden he's posing a threat to some people's structure, and they're coming after him like crazy. Even the environmentalists are going after him, trying to stop him from making electric cars, which they claim to be behind, which is just absolutely amazing when you think about it. But when the disciple reaches this point and introduces a belief system that runs contrary to other belief systems, there is tremendous conflict, and the disciple has to be prepared for this, that he may have a wonderful message given to him from on high, but when he goes out to introduce it, it's not going to be just accepted because everybody says this is superior, so I'm going to accept it. That's not the way it goes down. And the greatest example, like we say, is Jesus. He not only had beautiful words, but he demonstrated with great power, even the raising Lazarus from the dead. And even when he raised Lazarus from the dead, who was dead for over 3 days, and everyone said it was impossible to raise anyone from the dead that had been dead for more than 3 days. Well, Jesus went and did that. And instead of the powers that be, instead of looking at that and says, well, I guess that proves that he's really got something we ought to look at. No, they didn't say that at all. They said, you know what they said? They said, man, if we don't do something, the whole world's going to follow this man, and our systems are going to be destroyed. We have to preserve our system. And so they crucified him to try to get him out of the way. And
they thought he had a devil in him.
Yeah. So when we read this verse over, interpreting it from this angle, you can kind of see how it makes sense. And when he'd opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, come and see. And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given unto him thereon to take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. And so that is unfortunately something that the disciple has to deal with. Now, the next horse, the third horse, was black. And when he opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and him that sat thereon had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil nor the wine. So many think that the red horse was associated with emotion, but it was the life force. And this one is the one associated with the emotions. And it's got the interesting color of being black. And and it had a face of a man. Now, the man represents Aquarius, and he also represents right now the emotional nature, because man is right now is 90% of the control of the humanity is through the emotions. So the emotions is very powerful. Now it says a measure of wheat for a penny. Back in those days, a penny represented the average wage of the average person for a day, enough to buy food to live on for one day for one person, okay? And then 3 measures of barley for a penny, okay? So if you bought barley instead of wheat, you could feed 3 people for a day. So most of the regular interpreters of this just interpret this as being famine. They think it's a prediction of famine that's going to happen during the Great Tribulation. But the famine that really happens from the emotional nature. This is representative of the fact that the emotions, when a person puts its focus on the astral nature, the astral body, as we said, it turns everything kind of upside down or reverses everything, so nothing is seen clearly. So where the true famine happens to the individual in this that's suffering through the astral dominance is the famine of the spirit. Reminds me of the Old Testament verse that in the last days the Lord will send a famine, not a famine of food, but a famine of the word of the Lord. So people will not be able to find a true spiritual source anywhere in the days prophesied. And this happens to the individual. Now, the person at this point of evolution realizes that average humanity are going through this famine and they need fed. They can barely get enough. If a family man can only get enough to feed himself, then he's not able to feed his family. And this is the way it is with spiritual food. It's difficult enough to get the spiritual food to feed yourself, but people have to feed themselves before they can feed their family and their friends and be a spiritual source for anyone else. Now it says, see thou hurt not the oil or the wine. Now what's interesting about this is that oil and wine back in those days was a luxury. So the poor people put their attention on obtaining wheat and barley so that they could survive. Whereas the rich people focused on precious oils and good wine. And it says, see thou hurt not the oil or the wine. Okay, so for the disciple, as he goes about with his progression in mastering the astral world, he's already mastered the astral world as far as his own astral body is concerned. But in promoting his teachings, because at this point he is a teacher, in promoting his teacher, he has to deal with the famine that everybody around him is suffering through. So think of people that you know, and you try to shed some light with them. And as you look at them, it's like they're suffering, they're doing all their work just for enough spiritual food to survive and give them enough strength to face another day. They're not happy. They just want to, a lot of them want to escape this world. Matter of fact, a lot of people I see that think they're really on the spiritual path, they're really unhappy in this world, and they just can't wait to get out of it. Okay. But once the person is connected to the spirit, it doesn't really matter that much where he is, whether he's in the world or out of the world, whether he's in one situation or another, he will have the riches of the oil and the wine. Whereas the average people out there just are suffering a famine as far as the spiritual food goes. Now, on top of this, this also does apply to the disciple. He has to undergo some scarcity himself in some ways, is that when he goes forward with the work, with the spiritual work, treading the path of Christ, he will often have to sacrifice everything he has, because it's not the path of worldly riches. He can obtain them. He has in the past had power to, take care of himself and everything. But then sometimes he reaches a point to where he has to sacrifice himself. But don't hurt the oil or the wine. And the wine is symbolic of spiritual energy. The oil and the wine is symbolic of your spiritual source. Your spiritual source is where the true riches are. But then there are times where the outward riches, you may have to make some sacrifice in order to get your work done. Now, Curtis has a good story. It was right after he began to learn some higher knowledge. You got fired from your real estate job, Curtis. Didn't you want to tell a group how that happened?
Well, yeah, several things. I was exploring diet for one thing. We'd read that mucusless diet by Earhart.
Yeah.
And we were on a patrol looking at different houses that we were listing, and I was talking about diet, and the people in the car were all LDS. And I was saying, yeah, I'm experimenting with mucusless diet according to this book, and going without meat. And the guy says, well, that's kind of extreme. The elders kind of frown on that, any kind of extremity like that. And so word got out that I was an extremist experimenting with things that weren't condoned or authorized by the authorities. And I worked for Gate City Real Estate out of Pocatello. And he called me in. He says, we're hearing strange things about you. Plus, we hear your membership is in jeopardy. I said, well, yeah. I said, but I feel like I'm being unjustly accused. He said, well, that's fine, but we have our own reputation to uphold, and I hate to inform you, but from now on, you're going to have to look for someplace else to hang your shingle, just over stuff like diet or I tried to talk about some of the mysteries out of the Doctrine and Covenants, kingdoms higher than these, or holy men that you know not of, or things, kind of planting a seed, and boy, they all fell on rocky ground. But I was excommunicated and lost my job selling real estate of all things.
Who gets fired from real estate?
Who gets fired from real estate? But I did.
Yeah.
So I had, I was in the wilderness there. We were running ads for the restores, and that kind of fortified us spiritually because we were getting a good response. We ran ads in the Thrifty Nickel across the country. Gosh, how many people responded to that? Quite a few.
Yeah.
But Orthodox religion had no place for us, so that was it.
Yeah. And this also, the disciple also undergoes famine in a number of ways. Also, he can lose a lot of material things, but then he goes through periods where he doesn't seem to be accomplishing very much. And so he feels a sense of famine there. And it says, hurt thou not the oil or the wine, which is the higher connections you have with spirit. And so when the disciple goes through this period to where nothing much seems to be happening, like he wonders, well, maybe God's given up on me even. And so he's not supposed to discount the idea that he has that connection with spirit. It will come back. He must persevere. And this is where like enduring to the end comes in. He must endure until the mission is accomplished. And then he can enjoy the oil and the wine. Okay, somebody needs to be on mute here.
Well, I lost all my friends over that, so that was part of the wilderness. You lose your membership and people that you counted on to be your friends and your support consider you to be an apostate. So you kind of have to go into the wilderness and seek refuge on your own and kind of a personal communion after that.
Yeah, you got to go find a whole new set of friends.
We did.
Okay, anybody else got any stories around that idea that they kind of went through, or they kind of had to go through a material or a loss, or maybe a period where you felt like God had forsaken you and you were all by yourself? Anybody relate to that?
Maybe what Curtis was saying is in regards to one of the tests that we're given in life, that how well can you pull through it? How can you alleviate the pains and the sorrows and the suffering, and what's the proper way to travel with it? It's got a lot of potential to that being one of the tests that every person is given in life to some degree or another, we're doing good of karma. Say if you got bad karma coming to you, and it's bad enough that you would say lose an arm or a leg, but through doing right and the proper forms in life, you may just get a pin prick on your finger instead of having your whole arm or leg missing. So
Yeah.
it's worth following, trying to do as good as you can in this life, so that if you have to come back, which generally almost everybody's gonna, to recycle, at least next life, it won't be as bad as it is this life.
Yeah, so in other words, we endure to the end and just do the best we can, and sooner or later we'll have breakthroughs. Okay, we'll move
Yeah,
on.
do the best we can now till the end of this life, and then we'll come back better in the next life.
Yeah. Okay, next is the pale horse. This is the fourth, the fourth seal. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, "Come and see." And I looked and beheld a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto him over the fourth part of the earth to kill with the sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. Yeah, the way these read, I don't think anyone has ever interpret it the way we are here, that it represents the journey to becoming like Christ. But here's how it fits in. The fourth beast represents a flying eagle, which is a symbol representing Scorpio. Now, Scorpio is an interesting sign in the fact that it's associated with death. And a lot of people, a lot of astrologers, when they interpret Scorpio, kind of have a negative view of this sign. But what is overlooked about this sign is the meaning behind what is supposedly the negative aspects of it. The lesson in Scorpio is this, there are certain things that come into our life which are beyond our control. And even say like a master like Christ, when he was here, he maybe had control over his own life, but he didn't have control because of free will over what everybody else did. And sometimes he'd even get frustrated with his disciples. Like one time he asked the question, man, you guys are so out of it. How long do I have to be with you and put up with you guys? It's what he asked at one time when they didn't seem to understand what he was trying to teach them. And so there's things in life, as you go through life, there's things beyond your control that's associated with Scorpio. Divorce is another one associated with Scorpio. People often wind up in a divorcing situation they did not plan in. That's something that when they got married, they were getting married for life at least. And so they didn't plan on getting a divorce, but here they are, something completely unplanned. Or maybe they have a death of a child even, or something like this. It's totally unplanned. And in Scorpio, the lesson of Scorpio is to learn to accept the things that come into your life that most people consider negative, but to deal with them in the right way so they do not interfere with your progression. And this is a message of the fourth beast. And the fourth beast represents the lower mind. So we have the lower quaternary associated with these four beasts. The first beast, the physical. The second beast, the vital energy of the body. And the third beast, the emotional part of ourselves. And the fourth beast is the mind. And the mind has to learn to accept what is out there. And so this fourth beast had the name that sat on him was death, and hell followed with him. In other words, in the sign of Scorpio, the lesson to be learned here is you will encounter situations that you will consider as bad as death and hell. But how do you handle it? The wrong way to handle them, what sets the disciple far back is when he thinks, well, there must not be a God or anything. So he rejects the spiritual flow, and he is then tempted to go on the left-hand path. So to avoid the left-hand path, the disciple must accept the things that the general public consider death and hell. You know, the really bad stuff that happens out there. Like right now we have inflation and high gas prices, and well, we just, you know, we don't like it, but there's nothing we can do about it right now. So we just have to accept it and make the best of it is all we can do. Yes, Tessie.
Would that be maybe considered another test that we have to go through that, you know, is set in our path? You know, everybody has certain tests, but in a way, we all have the same tests to different degrees. But would that be maybe considered also a test in our path to enlightenment?
Would what be considered a test?
The issues that you just brought up, you know, that we go through and experience in life.
Yeah, right. They're not only tests so much as just lessons. so at this point in his, the disciple is treading the path to become like his master, the Christ. And this is a really important thing brought to us by the fourth beast. He has to be able to handle situations that come up that are negative and let them pass through them. He has to see the illusion behind them, because with the main thing to master with the mind is illusion. With the astral body, it was glamour. It was glamour where the ego is always magnified. The ego is so important, has to be protected. And so he eventually masters that, puts the ego in its place, but now he's in illusion. And all this, seeing all the bad stuff that happens as being totally negative is an illusion, because no matter what happens out there, you can turn the lemons into lemonade, so to speak. And that's what the disciple has to learn, and to make the best of it. Because even Jesus, by the time he began his mission, his father died, and that was probably upsetting to the family when his father Joseph died. So how did he handle it? Oftentimes when a loved one dies, people just have a really tough time, and they can't accept it. They question God's wisdom and his lovingness. But the disciple has to look at things like death, divorce, loss of money, loss of status, all kinds of bad things that can happen. He has to look at that in the correct light. He has to see through the illusion, because the illusion is that this can take you back. This can set you back a long way, but it doesn't have to. It's just illusion that we're caught in that makes us think that. And so,
Hey, JJ.
yeah.
So that might be behind the Apostle Paul saying that none of these things move me, when he was talking about all the trials and tribulations of his life. He summed it up at one point by saying, none of these things move me.
Right, and he also talked about a thorn in his side that God wouldn't take away from him. In other words, he had some type of injury that he never really specified, but he pointed out that well, I guess I needed it to keep me humble, was his basic response to it. So he had a really good attitude. Then another time he talked about all the things he went through. He was stoned a couple of times and suffered quite a number of injuries from the persecutions he underwent. I read about somebody had a vision of Paul, and his body and face was pretty well scarred up near the end of his life, according to this vision this person had. I don't know if it's accurate, but it's in harmony with the Bible. But he was an example of a person that had a lot of things happen to him beyond his control that people consider negative, but he saw it as positive. He saw it as stepping stones that was taking him higher. And this is the attitude the disciple has to make. So when something happens, let's say you wind up getting a divorce, you can look at it this way. You can think, well, maybe this is a way, opportunity to find somebody better. Maybe this is an opportunity to actually get more happiness out of life. And so a person, there's always two ways to look at everything that happens. And so this is the message of Scorpio. Scorpio is normally seen as a negative, a sign that if you have a lot of Scorpio in a certain place in your chart, it's kind of scary for a lot of people. But on the other hand, it's the word opportunity is there also. And it's opportunity to learn to neutralize anything negative in your life. So when you learn the message of Scorpio, as it's related here in the pale horse, you can have death and hell follow you, and they will not have an effect on you. Now, the thing that has the greatest effect on people, more than death or death of a family member, more than divorce, more than anything else, is hell. Okay, people are terrified of hell, and it says it peaks, and it says power was given unto him over the fourth part of the earth. So at least a fourth part of the earth are scared to the dickens about burning in hell, about suffering because of an angry God. So you have a large percentage of humanity that is terrified of going to hell. And they're willing to kill to get out of going to hell if necessary. And they're willing to do crazy things. And what the worst part of this is, they're terrified of moving forward. And this is one thing that the disciple who's treading the path of Christ has to deal with, is other people's fear of hell. And it was interesting, Curtis and I found it interesting when, after we were thrown out of the Mormon church, we decided to go enlighten the Mormons. And an answer we often got when we taught them about reincarnation was that he says, well, you know, that sounds really good, and it may very well be true, and it would be great if it is true. But let me put it this way. If you are wrong and the authorities are right, and if I follow you guys and get excommunicated, I could be in danger of being of going to the lowest outer darkness with the devil and his angels for all eternity, and that just scares the dickens out of me. So on the other hand, if I stay in the church, I'll be, and you're right, I'll get another chance in another life. So I guess I'll stay in the church. So so Curtis and I had a heck of a time trying to convert Mormons to reincarnation, because they were afraid of going to the deepest Mormon hell that there was. And that just terrified them. And they're called the Sons of Perdition in the Mormon Church, and it's the description of their situation is really terrifying, the way it's described. And so this really puts a fear of God into Mormons and makes it very difficult for them to escape. Matter of fact, if I hadn't had a very powerful revelation myself that I was on the correct path, it would have made my excommunication somewhat terrifying. But as it was, I was at peace. Curtis was at peace when he
Well, yeah, I got a witness on reincarnation myself. So I was standing in my own light. And what's amazing is you wrote this really simple article on eternal progression, showing that if something had a beginning, it had to have an end. If it had no beginning, it would have no end. So if a crime had a beginning, of course it had an end, and the punishment would have a beginning and an end. But people couldn't grasp that concept, that, even if I'm wrong, I'm only wrong for a short period of time.
Yeah. Has anyone else gone through a struggle of being worried about going to hell when they were younger? I don't think Ed's ever worried about going to hell. Have you, Ed?
I don't go to your house when you're not home.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I've ever believed in hell my whole life. I've never, it's never stuck to me, that concept of hell.
I think most of the people in the group haven't been caught up too much about worrying about going to hell. Because, if you feel a connection to your soul, you just have a sense that everything is just in the end. And if everything is just in the end, you're not going to be sent to some eternal hell with devils with pitchforks stabbing you for all eternity. I mean, that just does not equate into the vision of the loving God. And that's what turns many people off the churches is their belief in hell. And now there is a hell, and it's right here on this earth. People go through all kinds of experiences that they undergo a lot of suffering because of things that transpire in their own life. And so this is if you want to look for hell, you can find it right here on this planet.
Hey, JJ.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don Miguel Luis in the Four Agreements talked about how we're the only species in the animal kingdom that punish ourselves multiple times for our sins. And he says also, he talks about how this experience on earth is pretty basically hell. And he said, like, he talked about it being a spoiler alert that we are in hell. So if somebody threatens you with hell, just say, spoiler alert, we are in hell.
It's interesting. Wild animals, they don't have guilt or fear of hell in the slightest, Now, if you have a dog that's very close to you and he misbehaves, he can feel a little bit bad if you let him know that that he did something wrong. You can kind of sense that he's kind of evolving. So maybe poor thing, in some ways he was better off before he had any guilt. Anybody ever notice that with dogs, that they can kind of have a little bit of sense of shame if you catch them and doing something wrong?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how our dogs are exactly that way. You catch them doing something wrong and they'll mope for hours.
Yeah, they're kind of cute when they kind of respond that way. Kind of makes you feel like not punishing them. But okay, any other comments or questions before we wrap it up here?
I had a dog that if he was caught doing something wrong, he would try to explain himself.
Oh, really? How would he do that?
Well, he was a Siberian Husky, and they love to talk. You can go. His name was Rue, and I'd ask him, and friends would come over and say, "Hey, tell him what your name is." And he'd go, Rue.
Really? Yeah.
Hey, JJ.
Dogs are sweet animals. Yeah.
So I understand what you're saying about hell today. What was the purpose of different people in the New Testament? Even the Christ at one point, I think, gave a pretty scary depiction of hell. Can't remember who he was talking to, but describing. I mean, the religions got their descriptions of hell from the Bible, and why did they do that? Why did they describe it in that manner?
Well, when the prophets talked about hell, they were really warning people about cause and effect. In other words, if you hurt somebody else, you're going to have to pay for it one way or another. And the way that we pay for it is coming back to the earth and learning a lesson, so we don't do those things anymore. And so that's the hell that we have to worry about. Now, there are places in the astral world that's created by thought energy, not by God, but by the combined thought of people with guilty consciences, where they feel they have to punish themselves, and they're all temporary places where some people go that if they feel they need punishment enough. But normally the normal course is to return to our souls and learn our lessons, prepare for our lessons in our next life. And in the soul world, there's no retribution. There's merely examination and contemplation about how we're going to prepare for our next life, and so that we can
which
make
is
that
not a
next
hell. And the thing I was wondering is if it's you know, partly due to the people who assembled the Bible leaving important parts out, because it seems like the description is off in some
Well,
places.
I cover a lot of this in my writings, and we'll cover this at the end of the book where it talks about fire and brimstone. When you look at the Greek, fire and brimstone is quite a bit different than the way everybody interprets it. So we'll go into some of those things, and some of those things will be covered later in the book as we go through this.
You'll know you're in hell when it's dark, you're barefooted, and all the floors are covered with Lego blocks.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Well, there's a prayer, and you know, we talked a lot about mastering the art of letting go. There's a prayer that is recited by millions of people every day, and it goes like this: God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah, isn't that an AA thing?
That's
that they
called
say?
the Serenity Prayer. Yeah, it's
Oh,
used in
yeah.
AA, but it's also used by millions of people everywhere who find themselves up against a wall they can't break through.
Yeah. There's a lot of tough things happen to everybody. I mean, once you know, you maybe meet somebody who's just seems to have a charm life, but then you start talking to them and get to know them. Well, they got all kinds of things to complain about. So, you know, it doesn't matter who they are. Almost everybody has everything they can handle, and are not asking God for more tests. So anyway, we all have that opportunity to see things encounter things that are difficult, and learn to accept what you can't change. If you can't change it, then accept it and make the best of it, and then move on.
Well, everything that comes into our life, it's difficult is for balancing of karma or for our spiritual growth.
Yeah, that's true. So we'll continue here next week, and good class and good group, and we will see you then. It'll be next Sunday at 10 o'clock.
Thanks, JJ.
Thank you, JJ.
You bet.
Thanks, JJ.
And Ace, go fishing.
Thanks. Everyone take care.
Don't forget to spread some flowers out on your grandma's grave.
Oh yeah, we got Memorial Day tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, hey, good.
In
Memorial
fact, I'm
Day,
going to be
everybody.
doing that on your mom's grave. I'm going to pay her.
Everybody go see Top Gun for Memorial Day.
There you go.